What's going down? Your man Will Freeman, revolutionarylifestyledesign.com. Got my shirt off today because it's hot as anything. I'm going to talk to you about why civilization, agriculture was a mistake and what to do about it. Something that I've talked about before on my website, something you can read about in Sapiens, something you can read about in Jared Diamond's book, Guns, Something and Steel. I don't care. I already know this stuff. You can find out right here. Okay, I'm going to break it down for you. Basically, for the vast majority of human history, however long we've been humans for, hundreds of thousands of years, a million years, since the last 10,000 years, we've been living in these so-called civilized societies. Before then, it was hunter-gatherer tribes, much like the rare primitive tribes that are still existing today. Not particularly tied to any one land, hunting and gathering food, and living without a ton of responsibilities. Not to say that lifestyle isn't difficult, okay? Coming from where we are now, it'd be incredibly difficult to adjust to something like that. But you can look at the studies, you can look and observe the primitive people, and you can see that for the vast majority, they are relatively happy. They have way less stress than we do. They have less illnesses. They're eating natural foods. They're outside in the sun all day. They're not sitting in front of a computer. They're not breathing in air conditioning. They're not dealing with pollution. They're not dealing with whatever signals we're getting from Wi-Fi. The rates of cancer are lower. The rates of heart disease are lower. The rates of, dental infections. And the list goes on. And if you look at those guys, some of them are in their 60s and 70s. They're lean. They're jacked. They're living off healthy animal foods and plants. And that was how we were evolved to live. We were evolved to live within nature, without pollution, without dumping all these chemicals into the water supply, without fluoride in the water, and sort of living amongst the animals as an evolved animal. I don't believe man is purely an animal. I believe man has spiritual capabilities. But basically we lived within the earth, within nature, within God's hand. Now, we still live in God's hands, but we also live in these civilizations, these societies that we've built up over the last 10,000 years. And if you compare the amount of human suffering from then until now, I can tell you it's monumental. You've got rape, you've got torture, you've got wars where hundreds of millions of people are killed, you've got pollution, you've got smog, you've got all kinds of diseases that didn't exist until the last 10,000 years. You've got governments, people who are not your kin, who tell you what to do. You've got, this whole evolution outside of these small hunter-gatherer tribes where everybody knew each other, they weren't anonymous, and therefore things like crime and, all types of horrible human things that we do to each other were much less prevalent because you basically had everyone relying on each other to survive, and everyone knew each other and everyone was related in some way. Now, of course, you had intertribal warfare, but the worst that was going on was, attacks with small, weapons and things like that. There weren't biochemical attacks. I mean, nuclear attacks. It's insane to think that we've leveled entire cities with nuclear weapons that had fallout for hundreds of years after. Not to mention the fact that there were no janitors, there were no sewer workers, there were no people working in factories, there were no nurses working, 3 jobs in overtime in terrible conditions to make ends meet. You didn't have to worry about insurance, you didn't have to worry about car payments, you didn't have to worry about your mortgage, you didn't have to worry about saving for your kid's college fund, and a million of the other stresses and strains that we have to be able to survive in a society like this, with passports and bank accounts and knowing how to invest and knowing how to build a business and knowing how to budget your money and avoiding all the myriad of traps and things to buy, and the fact that, for the vast majority of people, we're not capable of growing our own food. We don't own land, so we have to work and constantly worry about bills. And that's maybe 1 to 5% of the problems that people face on a daily basis. And if you compare suffering post-agriculture and post-civilization, it's my bet, in my opinion, that it's been massively greater. Okay, and if you don't believe me, just look into the history of any of the wars. I mean, pretty much every country's had a war within its boundaries. You've got, 25, 30% of people living below the poverty line. In Africa and poorer countries, you got people living on $2 a day. I mean, it is rough out there. And if we're looking at happiness and suffering as the guide to human life and human quality of life, I feel like that has gone massively down for uh, the vast majority of people, especially the people who are, really suffered through wars and crime and all these types of things. Um, so that's my opinion on it. But we are in a so-called civilized society. We are in a post-agricultural society. We're in a post-industrial society, and now we've moved into the greatest revolution of all time, the internet and technological revolution. We have no idea where that's going. There's AI. If you've seen Elon Musk on Joe Rogan talking about AI, that's some scary stuff. Hope it's going for the better. I'm still an optimist, but needless to say, to be able to survive and thrive in this kind of environment, you've got to be really smart. You've got to work hard, and some luck involved. I mean, I consider myself lucky just being born in Canada, having the education that I did, having the mom that I did, having the environment I did. I didn't grow up in a crime-ridden environment. I grew up in a first world country, and I've had tons of advantages for that. Um, but not everyone has that. There's people, suffering all the time of things that I can't even have a reference point right now. There's guys in wars right now. There's, tremendous suffering going on. And in my opinion, you know, civilization, agriculture, in terms of human happiness, has been a massive step downward. Maybe we'll get it together in the future. Maybe AI will help us. Maybe we'll learn to come together. Um, you know, I do believe in good, and I believe that that's possible. But the question is, you're here, I'm here, I'm speaking to you through my phone. Okay, I grew up on a rotary phone. Now I'm speaking to you on my phone. I have a business where I do videos on my phone. Okay, just massive exponential technological growth. And for better or worse, we need to learn how to survive and thrive in this system. Okay. If you're struggling right now, if you're depressed, I mean, some people choose the option to end their life. Okay, let's just rule that out as a terrible choice, even if you're suffering. Okay, that to me is not an option. Um, some people say they want to go off the grid. Okay, and they want to. You can go off the grid in Thailand, but I'm in Chiang Mai right now. You can see it's much underdeveloped than a Western city, but there's still Wi-Fi signal all around here. You still need to go to immigration every 90 days. If you want to go off the grid, you got to go pretty much 8 hours north into the mountains and survive up there with the tigers. And I'll tell you that, you're throwing away your passport, you're throwing away your bank account, and your chances of survival, I'm 35. I've never, your chances of survival are very low. Okay. The other way people think is they can go farm and produce their own food, but I'll tell you, farmland costs money. If you're a foreigner like I am here in Thailand, you can't buy farmland. That's only available for Thai people. You'll find in most Asian countries that's your only option, and also in many countries around the world. So if you're an American or Canadian, you have to buy farmland, okay, and that costs money. All right, and you're not off the grid when you're using money, and you're not off the grid when you're using your passport. And if you have a health scare, let's say you're trying to raise a family on a farm, you're probably going to want to take your kids to the hospital, which means you're going to need passports, you're going to need ID cards, you're going to need bank accounts, you'll probably need a driver's license, and all these different things. If you want to truly go off the grid, you have to get rid of that cell phone, have to get rid of the passport, have to get rid of um, the bank that you use. You can forget about healthcare because you need all those things to get healthy. You can forget about all technology. You can forget about personal grooming, and you're just going to have to be able to, survive. And even then, it's like you're still expected to pay taxes. Okay, so to me, going off the grid's kind of an illusion that's sold to you by people with blogs who probably aren't off the grid themselves. Okay, and if they're using a phone and they're using an internet, you can just assume that everything you've ever typed and watched, and probably everything you're speaking into your phone, is being recorded somewhere by at least 4 different major internet companies, probably most of the intelligence agencies as well. You can say that privacy is pretty much done. There's a chip in your phone. Your passport tracks where you are. Not geolocation per se, but I mean, you can't get into somewhere without a passport, so your government knows where you are. Going off the grid to me is either an illusion or it's you living in the mountains of Thailand with your passport gone and you trying to survive and hunt with tigers. Okay. Another option is a monastery. Okay, if you have faith like I do, I considered that in my early 20s. I actually think that's an excellent option. Have considered it many times since then, and maybe when I get older, I might totally devote my life to God. But I can tell you that the kind of discipline that requires, I'm not ready for that. Okay, even then, you'll still need your passport. You'll probably still need a bank account. But, that's effectively pretty close to being off the grid. No one's going to bother you. You're not going to be using a smartphone. But you are going to be living a very strict, severe, and you're going to have to be very dedicated. No girls. You're going to have to eat the diet that the monastery espouses. You're hopefully going to get along with the other people there. And, it's going to be a very solitary, difficult life. I think a lot of people mistake the spiritual path for, what a lot of New Age people tell you. And I think it's a very difficult path, especially if you're totally devoting yourself to it. But I think that's an excellent option for some guys if you have the discipline. With that said, you don't want to go to a monastery when you're 25 and realize that you can't make it at 35 and come back and have to start again in society. You're going to be way behind the 8 ball and it's going to be very difficult for you. So that type of decision would have to be something that you would be for sure that you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. Okay, I think that's a viable option, but I think for the vast majority of you guys who are watching my website where I talk about health, wealth, relationships, lifestyle, mindset, and spirituality, that's probably not going to be an option for most of you, at least not at the age that you're at now. So that leaves you a couple options. You can be poor in society, and I'll tell you this, I grew up poor. I went broke a few times in my 20s after being rich, and it is horrendous. I would not wish being poor on anybody. I wish everybody would be able to have their needs met, okay? But if you're working McDonald's night shift for 7 days, 7 days a week, you can't even provide for yourself, let alone for your family. Very difficult as a janitor, factory worker, even just a low-level, account executive making $40,000. You can't afford to live in society, okay? The fact is 99% of people can't afford to live in society, and if you look around at the so-called prosperity, the cars, the house, the food they eat, that's on credit card debt, that's on car debt, that's on housing debt. And, by the time someone's 27, they've got student loans, credit card debt, maybe a mortgage, car payment, and they're living paycheck to paycheck for the most part. 57% of Americans have less than $1,000 in their bank account, okay? The middle, obviously, people in the lower class are in poverty, but the middle class is poverty, right? Middle class, say you're making 60 grand, that's 4 grand after taxes. A guy who makes 25 grand a year, pays maybe 5 grand in taxes, comes home with $2,000 a month because he's paying less taxes than you do. You're coming home with $4,000 a month. You probably have more expenses than he does. So you're pretty much in the exact same boat with maybe a couple, $2,000 more a month, but you're probably spending that because it's real hard to live on $4,000. Okay, and the reason it's real hard to live is everyone forgot about the Great Depression, so everyone's living on credit. So to be able to live well, you either have to make a lot of money or you have to go on credit like all the other idiots to be able to keep up with them, because the price of goods is all factored into people using credit for everything. Not to mention the fact that in the 50s, a man could afford a house himself. In fact, that was who houses were targeted to, because women didn't work. But now with women working, houses are priced into 2 people working. Okay, so the idea was women could choose to get married or choose to work. But the end reality is, 90% of women choose to get married, but their husband doesn't make enough, so they're married and they have to work. And now you've got 2 people paying for a house, 2 people working, 2 people exhausted at the end of the day, 2 people fighting over what chores to do, and then they're outsourcing the childcare to daycares and paying someone else to raise their kids for a large part of the day, as well as the schooling system. um, very difficult to survive and thrive if you're not wealthy, especially if you're like me. And I'm not sure if I want to have kids. I know I need to hit my financial targets. I'm doing quite well now, by the grace of God, but I know that I got to go much larger for me to be comfortable, because I grew up poor and I promised that I wouldn't raise my children poor. And I would like for my wife not to have to work a job, because I've hated every job that I've ever had. I'm sure that she has as well. And I would like to be able to take care of her and, make her life comfortable. Maybe she could do things to help me, and for her to be able to do a lot of the childcare and take care of the kids while I'm out working really hard to make the money and protect and provide. Not for everybody, but if I were to have kids, it would probably be that type of a system. I'd have a maid, I'd have a cleaning lady, maybe a chef, or at least we'd order in a lot of meals so we could live at a high standard of living. And I think if you are a fan of my site, you know that I'm all about lifestyle optimization, health, wealth, relationships, um, lifestyle, mindset, and spirituality. Okay, and there's two things that you need of those six things that I listed, and they need to be your biggest priorities. Number one is your health. Health used to be my number two priority. Now it's my number one priority. After I've got some nagging health issues that I'm working on, making some progress. And without your health, you're dead. Without money, you sleep on the streets. Okay, those two things need to be your biggest priorities. Not girls, not going to the movies, not learning a language. You need to get those areas handled, and the faster you get them handled, the better you're going to do. Okay, so if civilization and agriculture is a mistake in terms of human happiness, okay, don't get me wrong. I'm not going back to tribal living. I couldn't survive, most likely. There's no tribe that's going to adopt me. Farming, I'd probably starve, because I'm competing with huge corporations and families who are 3 to 4 generations of farmers. I don't have the discipline to go to a monastery. And going into the mountains of Thailand to survive with the tigers, chances are I'm going to be dead within a month. Okay? So my real option, and I think this is your real option for living well, is to get wealthy. Okay? To become part of the 1%. If you remember Occupy Wall Street, where you had a bunch of spoiled kids complaining and spending their whole summer railing against the 1%, I'll tell you something. Those kids are the 1% in America, probably the top 1% in the world. Okay? And I'll tell you that because they could afford not to work all summer. Poor people can't afford not to work. Probably a good amount of them had trust funds. The other came from wealthy parents whose household income were probably over $100,000, because their parents were able to pay for university. So on summer break, they were able to go and not shower, not shave, and complain about Wall Street. Don't get me wrong, not a fan of Wall Street. Okay, I'm just saying, at the end of the day, this is an economic planet. There's a million things I don't like about civilization. There's a million things that are unfair. There's a million ways that people are not treated well. I don't like that so much of life is about money, but you can't turn a blind eye not to that problem and not suffer. And to live well, you need money, okay? Because we're not just talking about living well, we're living comfortable. We're talking about, for one, your health, okay? 25% of people die of cancer, another 25% die of heart problem. Probably someone in your family, possibly your parents, will have that at some point, and you'll ideally want to be able to help or pay for that. You need about $1 million to retire in North America right now. By the time we're 65, you'll probably need 2.5 million, especially because there's a good chance with medical technology we'll live to 100. Okay, if you are going to retire, I'm not going to retire, but I know that a lot of people will. So you're going to need about 2.5 mil. Your parents probably won't have enough money, because they won't have saved enough money, because they were, trying to keep up with everyone else, trying to survive, paying for you. So you'll probably have to help them, unless you want to put them in an assisted facility, which I think is terrible. Not to blame you if you do. Okay, but a half decent assisted living center is about $60,000 a year. So ideally, you're going to want to have a big enough house for, your non-legal wife. Okay, I still do not legally recommend marriage. Maybe your kids. Maybe you don't have kids, but you at least have a big enough house so you can help your parents, or you can help them with a house next door, maybe some private nursing care, make their retirement comfortable. And that's just a few things. Okay, you want to be able to help your friends, you want to be able to help yourself, you want to be able to fix your health problems, you want to be able to not worry about bills, you want to be able to buy organic food, possibly travel, you want to be able to move somewhere sunny. Every decision you make involves money. Okay, everything is an economic decision in one way or the other, and having money does not make you happier, but it makes it way easier to be happier. I can tell you, you'd be way happier with a couple million in the bank. Not necessarily not for life, but it would make it way easier to be happier because you could solve so many problems. Money either solves a problem entirely or drastically reduces the damage of that problem. And that applies to your health, wealth, relationships, lifestyle, every area of your life. Money makes things much easier. And to live well, you've got to be part of the top 1%. Okay, if you're making $60,000, you're top 1% of the world. But that's not enough in North America. All right, for you to be able to sort of feel like you're a little bit comfortable, I tell guys, if you're living in North America, to aim for 100 grand and 100 grand, which is 100 grand in the bank, 100 grand coming in per year. But ideally, I mean, especially if you're going to have a family, I'd like to see you get to 250. Okay, and that's just in your average American city. If you're living in New York or San Francisco, where the average cost of living is 5 grand a month, 60 grand a year, you need 250 because the government's going to take 30% of that. Inflation's going to erode 3% per year, and you add, kids medical bills. Maybe you want to send them to private school, helping your partner, helping your parents. I mean, man, you need a lot of money. If you're like I am, and you're, doing the expat entrepreneur thing, you still need money because you don't want to be stuck in a third world country forever. You want to have options. And to me, I tell guys, do not buy into that digital nomad dream of going over to a country, starting a business with no money, trying to live on $300 a month. That's going to fail. And the vast majority of guys who come out here end up going home probably having to borrow money from their parents for the plane ticket with their tail tucked between their legs. If you're coming out to a country like this, I'll tell you, the dream is not the reality. You got to sit inside when it's nice out all day. You got to work like a dog. You got to deal with payment processors. You got to deal with the foreign bank system, with immigration, which is a nightmare. It takes a lot of work. It's not sitting up by the beach on your laptop. If you're doing that, your business is going to fail. Okay, your business is either expanding or contracting every year. If your business is contracting, it's on the path to failure. If your business is neutral, it's on the path to failure because there is no neutral in the game of life. Okay, it's just an illusion that you see in hindsight, and a flat line. Gravity brings a flat line down. All right, so you need to be constantly expanding your business every year, and you can't be satisfied with a couple grand a month. Now, you can live well over here on 4 grand a month. That's probably the equivalent to 100 grand back home, especially if you're not an American and you can set up a legal non-residency like you can if you're Canadian or Australian. But again, money is not something where you stop at 4 grand, even 10 grand. Okay, I did close to 10 grand last month by the grace of God, and after having launched my coaching program, and now I'm trying to do 25, and then from 25 I'm trying to do 40. So I'm launching 2 other projects. There's going to be RLD marketing coming. There's going to be RLD web design, where we design your sites for free. Going to launch a ton of courses, going to expand my coaching, and just going to keep going, working with money as my number 2 problem right now. Okay, my biggest problem is solving a couple health issues. My second biggest problem is the fact that I don't make 25 grand a month. Even though my tax structure out here is very favorable, and even though I'm living in Thailand, which is a developing country, that is still a problem for me because I know how important money it is, and I want to be super aggressive about it and get it to a point where I'm just smoking it, because I know that I never want to have money problems again. I never want to worry about money. And I think that's the same for you. So there's 2 ways to get there. One, the unethical way, ripping people off, Ponzi schemes, selling bullshit stocks. If that's your path, hypothetically speaking, just joking, jump off a bridge, like hypothetically speaking, got enough of those people in the world. Okay. But if you're on the same path as me, you want to be able to do it ethically. And my opinion is to do a service business, whether that's marketing, whether that's sales training, whether that's selling real estate, whether that's selling insurance, whether that's selling fitness coaching, or any of the other service businesses. If you check out my site, I've got a link of 31 six-figure service businesses. Okay, I do not recommend starting a product-based business. I think it's too difficult, especially for a rookie entrepreneur. That's something you can try maybe 4 or 5 years in, when you got 10 grand coming in, you got 100 grand in the bank, and you can afford to drop 4K on another stream of income. But I'd rather have you throw that into your business that works. Service business is super high margin, low overhead, and if you're going to put it into anything else, do it like I do, put it into other service business streams. And on top of that, you work on getting your health in good shape, building relationships with like-minded winners, with women who are honest, loyal, and sweet, developing a lifestyle where you're up early, where you're organized. Check out my book, How to Get Organized, revolutionarylifestyledesign.com, to see how I do that. Possibly move somewhere that's sunshine. As you can see, this is a lot nicer than a Canadian winter. And optimizing those areas while you are spending 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day trying to solve money, trying to get up to 10 grand a month, 100 grand in the bank, and then from there on getting to 250, right? And then focusing on protecting that wealth, minimizing taxes, and securing your financial future. Because if you don't solve the money problem, it's going to keep hitting you every day, man. And what you don't realize is there's a million money decisions you're making every day already. If you're not financially secure, you just don't realize them. Okay, and it'll be like the big two are, I can't afford that, right? Maybe you can't afford dental surgery, or you can't afford to go shopping, or you can't afford a nice restaurant and you're hoping the girl doesn't order the steak and the wine. Or, okay, it's I can't afford that, or I have to do that, which means I have to work this job that I hate. So for 50, 60 hours a week, I basically hate my life. All right? And money solves those two big problems. So to solve the problem of civilization, okay, assuming you're not going to go run into the jungle, assuming you're not going to try your hand at farming and pretend you're off the grid, which you're not, assuming you're not going to a monastery because you probably don't have the discipline, you have to get wealthy, and you have to make civilization work for you, because you're not going to be happy as a janitor or a factory worker or an account executive making 40 grand. And you have to go hard as hell, and you have to make that your biggest priority outside of your health. And if you want to know how to do that, check out revolutionarylifestyledesign.com/money. Probably got about 100 free articles and videos for you there. You can also check out my book, How to Sell, at revolutionarylifestyledesign.com, to see how to make 6 figures in sales as well as 6 figures in your own service business. And that, my friends, is the message. I hope you found that useful. And if you got any questions, let me know in the comment section. As always, I wish you love, and I wish you all the best in your personal development journey.